Picture me 3 years ago. Fat little Brian who would game 12 hours per day. He had business ventures he wanted to start and university work to do, and he'd spend an hour and a half on it only to get 10 minutes of work done in that time. Sometimes I'd be going through like a web development course and there was like a lesson to read and it took me 45 minutes just to read one lesson. I went from that to making a full-time online income in 1 year, and now, a couple of years later, I'm posting 3 videos a week to this channel, and I'm doing this whilst mentoring a bunch of people to run their own channel, whilst also working on the product from my 100,000 subscriber YouTube channel, which is still my main source of income. I'm doing this whilst also making a course for this channel, and I do all of this whilst only working an average of 4 hours per day. If you were to take older Brian and put him into the routine that I'm doing right now, younger Brian would drown. It would be like trying to beat a level 50 boss at level 1. In this video, I'm going to tell you how I did it. Before we start, my name is Brian and I help you quit your 9 to 5 and turn your hobby into a business. I made this channel for ambitious people like you that want to do this, break free, not have a boss anymore, and just do what they want essentially. So if you resonate with that, you are like us. Everyone on this channel is doing this, so subscribe. Step 1 to working like an entrepreneur that makes 10k a month is working on your consistency. I'm not gonna lie to you, man. When I work, I still get distracted sometimes, and when I do my gym sessions, I train relatively hard, but I don't do anything crazy. But the one thing I won't take away from myself, and the one thing I'm really good at, is consistency. In the last 6 months, I've probably skipped maybe 1 gym session, 2 gym sessions. Same goes for work. In the last 3 or 4 months, 1 or 2 work sessions. And when I do skip work or the gym, it's never because I wanted to skip it. It's always because I've either got some sort of social thing going on or I'm traveling that day. I feel quite sick today. I caught something from my girlfriend, I think, I don't know, and I really didn't want to record this video today. Sometimes I don't feel like doing something, but I've gotten to the stage where my mind doesn't even give me an option to skip anymore. Like that thought doesn't even enter my head. So the first thing, and by far the most important thing you need to start getting good at, is just showing up. At first, when I started my first YouTube channel, I didn't ask a lot of myself. I wanted to work just 1 hour per day, which at the time for me was quite realistic, and I set myself this schedule. Day 1, I would script a video, day 2, I would record it, day 3, I would edit it, and day 4, I would upload it. And that was a realistic schedule for me. At first, those tasks took me about an hour per day to finish, and that's all I did. A really important thing to remember is the consistency that doing these realistic things every day builds across a year, and the amount of work you get done across a year is worth so much more than trying to squeeze every last drop out of yourself in just that 1 week, because you know exactly what's going to happen when you try to work more than that. If you're not used to working for yourself and you start trying to work like me, like I am right now, it's not going to work, bro. You have to work up to it. Otherwise, you're just going to stick to it for maybe a week, week and a half. Then inevitably, you're going to start slipping, because I tried the same thing. That's how I know this happens. I tried to work 4 hours, 5 hours per day. And first of all, I only ever got like 30 minutes to an hour of quality work done during that time anyway. But second of all, dedicating that much time to work, inevitably, I ended up slipping, and then I'd take month-long breaks, 2-month-long breaks. So keeping that consistency is way better over the long term. Building that consistency for yourself will create a base which then you can apply the rest of the advice in this video on. Essentially, just aim to show up and see what you get out of it. Some days you might only be able to sit down for 10 minutes and then you'll be done. But some days you might surprise yourself. You might even get 3 hours. But just aim to show up and don't put too much pressure on how much work you actually end up getting done. The system I told you about earlier worked quite well for me, and with that system I managed to not miss any days at all. But there was still a problem. Step 2 in working like an entrepreneur is handling distractions. I would be able to work for myself and I'd get all of the work done that I had to do every day, but realistically it was taking about 3 or 4 times longer than it should have done. I would often work with another tab open and I would cope that it's not slowing me down at all when it was. I would work whilst listening to music, and some music, if it doesn't have lyrics, can be fine, but honestly, I would avoid it if I were you. And you might be surprised to hear this, man, but even your work can be a distraction. Some tasks that we do in our work don't really push the needle forward. For example, I've been meaning to make a channel banner and rebrand this channel a little bit to quitting your 9 to 5 and turning your hobby into a business as like the main focus of it. Because right now it's still a little bit self-improvement based in the branding, but that work is shallow work. It's not deep work that actually pushes the needle forward, so I haven't done it yet. So now, when you show up every day for 10 minutes, 60 minutes, if you're lucky, you might be able to do 2 hours. Now that you can actually show up, start aiming to do real work during that time. And you know what real work is deep down. It's that type of work that you've been avoiding, maybe for the last month, 2 months. There's this task on your mind that you really need to get done, but you haven't yet. Start doing that work. The problem with getting distracted whilst working is that it's usually automatic, like subconscious. I would usually be working on whatever I'm working on. My brain would get this random thought, and then I'd automatically Control T to open a new tab, type Y, press enter, and it would automatically open YouTube because I'd go on it so often. And then without thinking, I'd click on a video and start watching it. And by that time, I was hooked. And before I knew it, 5-10 minutes had been wasted. And not only that, I now had to spend another 10 minutes getting into focus. And this happened multiple times per work session. You need to be able to cut that circuit off right at the beginning to waste as little time as possible. So what you're going to do is start installing blockers. And it's not for the reason that it will stop you going on the thing, because you can just turn the blocker off. In that sense, blockers are actually kind of silly. But what the blocker does do is make you add an additional step in between you and that bad habit, so you can actually catch yourself in the process when you're about to do it. So now every time you try and go on that distraction and catch yourself, it's like doing one bicep curl for your focus. But even this sometimes didn't work, because work is boring and your brain seeks novelty. It wants something new, especially if you're used to modern technology, TikTok, and all of that. Your brain needs new stimulation constantly. So sometimes you might even cope in your head and go on YouTube anyway, despite consciously now the blocker being there. So to combat this, we need to start embracing boredom in our everyday life. The next time you have to wait for a bus and the bus is 7 minutes away, don't go on your phone. Get your brain used to the lack of stimulation, similar to what you have when you're doing work. And to be honest, man, I think we only feel bored because we're so addicted to technology now. After a while of doing this and repairing your attention span and actually being able to do nothing and be okay with it, boredom gets replaced with presence, and you actually start being grateful for the world around you. So it's quite a nice side effect, and it also helps with your work. Another thing that's a bit of a weird tip that helped me is that sometimes slowing the progress of your work down whilst you're working is better. So for example, if you're writing something down and you kind of are missing a piece of information, and it would help if you were to open a new tab and look it up on Google, don't immediately jump to that. When I switch tabs to find out some piece of information that I need, even now, sometimes I find myself getting stuck in this tangent again where I've clicked on the next thing, then the next thing, and before I know it, I've wasted 15 minutes. Consider just making a note to look it up later, or just picking your brain for the information. This comes down to avoiding what's called the any benefit approach. Some people do something because it's got a benefit, but they don't weigh the pros and cons. For example, smoking cigars raises your testosterone, but it also causes cancer and messes up a bunch of other things in your body. So don't fall into that trap. So now I could work consistently and I could focus quite well. But the problem was I was still working about 1 or 2 hours per day at this point. And that's literally all my brain could handle before it ran out of willpower points, before I literally couldn't do anymore. My brain would stop working and it wouldn't let me. And that brings us to step 3 of working like an entrepreneur, which is routine. You wake up, with a certain amount of willpower points in your day. And every time you make a decision, you deplete those points. They get a little bit lower. And as soon as they reach 0, you basically can't do anything. Every time you go on your phone and start scrolling TikTok, stopping to scroll uses up a lot of your willpower points. And what a routine essentially does is it stops you from having to use any willpower points when making decisions, because you already know at 8 a.m. you're doing this, you're doing a 2-hour work block, then at 10 a.m. you're stopping and going for a walk. You don't have to use your brain. Honestly, man, even now, for me, working without a routine is really hard. I find it really hard to start things if I haven't pre-planned it. So if you're someone that finds starting things hard, then a routine will really help you, because that was one of my main problems. But I do want to emphasize the importance of being kind to yourself. If you've just managed to be consistent and work 1 hour a day, don't think that a routine is going to automatically make you be able to work 5 hours, 6 hours straight away, because that's not going to happen. If you try and up it drastically like this, you're going to be able to stick to it for a week, then you're going to get burnt out, and then you're going to stop altogether. So when I first started doing a routine, I upped my work time from 1 hour to about 2.5 hours, and I did it as part of a morning routine. I would wake up, meditate for 20 minutes, make my coffee, and then immediately work for that amount of time. And then usually I'd go to the gym afterwards. Now my routine is I wake up at about 5:30 a.m. I meditate, I make my coffee, I work for 2 hours, then I take an hour break, and then I work for another 2 hours. So when you start your routine, over time, you can slowly start increasing the amounts that you're working. But I will stress this. Only increase the time if you can actually focus for the current amount of time that you're working. Because if you start increasing the time when you can't focus, you're basically wasting time, because if you just learn to focus a little bit better, you wouldn't have to do that extra 30 minutes of work anyway. It's better to add the intensity to the work first and then add the volume, the actual amount of hours, than to start doing 6 or 7 hours and then trying to be really intense for those 6 to 7 hours, because that's never going to work out. And for the routine, I would start by only having it in a certain part of your day. So if you don't have any obligations, do a morning routine. A morning routine is best because when you wake up, you still have all of your willpower points, so it's the easiest to follow. But if you have a job, an evening routine is fine too. If you start trying to schedule your entire day straight away, the same thing will happen. You're going to burn out, so start slowly adding to it. The vast majority of the time growing my channel, and even after I started making a lot of money online, only like the first 5 or 6 hours of my day was actually scheduled. And I also wanted to mention that working 4 hours a day is enough to reach quite a high level of success. I mean, someone like Dan Coe only works 4 hours per day and he earns like $1 million a year now. If you want to work 12 hours per day, go ahead, but you don't have to. Next, I wanted to touch a little bit on your work method, because there's a lot of talk about monk mode in the entrepreneur community. And monk mode is essentially just this period of intense focus where for anywhere between 1 week and 2 or 3 months, you're basically military disciplined. You basically have the same routine every day. You're working like loads. You're going to the gym every day. And you're basically getting a ton of work done in a very condensed period. And then after that monk mode, you have 4 or 5 days or a week, maybe a day, depending on how long the monk mode was, to just do nothing and just chill out. And the second method is just consistency, just doing the same thing every day, just working for the first 4 or 5 hours of your day and then learning for a little bit, then going to the gym. That's what's worked best for me personally, but the monk mode method works for a lot of other entrepreneurs. So you're going to have to find what works best for you. And that's actually the best thing about it. When you start your own business, you can actually work in a way that works best for you. You don't have to listen to anyone telling you to work a certain way that's probably not optimal for you. And that all comes down to freedom. If you want to wake up, work 3 hours, and spend the rest of the day at the beach in Thailand, you can. If you want to wake up, work 12 hours, and then the next day do nothing, you can. And that's the best thing about it, the freedom. If you want me to teach you from start to finish how to turn your hobby into a business, then I'm making a full course which hasn't come out yet, but you can join the waiting list for it in the description. See you next video.